Today, we are going to show mathematically that the population worldwide in the last 1,400 years was basically zero. When the mainstream history tells us that at the exact same time period, where basically nobody was here, they were building palaces, castles, and cathedrals. And before we expose the population lie today, we have to get an understanding of how this all works, from the bottom up. Welcome to Reims, France, where we hold one of the most incredible structures in the world, and it's under investigation today. The Reims Cathedral, where we are being told that the construction of this cathedral started in the year 1211, where this is 813 years ago. Now, in the USA, they can tell us that these type of cathedrals were built in the 1800s. So they're at least trying to fit this type of construction into this mainstream timeline that we're given today. But when we go over to Europe, they just don't seem to care one bit. They throw dates around and everyone just accepted it for years. Could you imagine that next week, any city in the world tells us that one of these are going to be thrown together? I think the world would be shocked. Yet, when we are told that this was built 813 years ago, in the year 1211, we all just said, yeah, that sounds like a good year. Until now. Because we have patterns to look for, especially when a building holds the fire narrative, where we have found over 100 buildings to this point that hold a fire narrative, which is no longer mathematically possible. I'm in the middle of counting them all up throughout the first 62 episodes, and I'm already over 100 old world buildings that have caught fire that we have found on this channel. And we have found this fire pattern on this channel. And we will soon have a running tally on the screen every time we find a new one. And this one's gonna be added to the group when we are told that this cathedral in France wasn't even the first one. They had an even earlier church that was destroyed by a fire a year before construction began on this new one. And this one lasts forever. So they knocked this thing out in 80 years when, let's be honest, if we didn't have a power tool or a car or a shipping company or any architectural training processes today, do any of us actually believe that our civilization would just knock this thing out in 80 years? Realistically, I'd love to know in the comments below how long you think this building would take today. I'm interested to see what you all think, especially because we're being told that this building was built over 800 years ago. The fact that we can see these buildings all over the world, they're still here. It's not like I'm talking about something that's a hidden mystery. We can all go there and look at it, and then compare it to the buildings that we produce today, which is supposedly over 800 years of evolving and advancing, and it's not even close. So let's think about this for a second. We are supposed to believe that they had construction down, and it was perfect since the beginning of time, yet nothing else advanced. Only construction. Building palaces was the only thing the 1200s were good for, apparently. The problem is that the buildings are the only thing that are left from the 1200s, which is exactly why they're forced to make these dates up in order to try to explain them into our fabricated timeline. Whereas a car or a watch, a phone, a plane, and a helicopter, they've all been here before as well. They just aren't built into the ground all over the world for all of us to see, when the buildings are. We are told that the designer of this cathedral was Jean de Orbais. And who exactly was this master designer? Starting at point guard, making his debut for the France National Historians. Jean constructed the Abbey Church, or did he find it? Where they tell us that the Abbey was found at the end of the 7th century. And don't worry, they had construction down, of course. Still there in the town center today. When they go on to say 600 years later, Jean debuts building the St. Pierre St. Paul Church, where it was built between the end of the 12th century and early 13th century. And we have all of this documented, of course. No. Today, we are going to show that there were mathematically, basically, no people here in the 12th and the 13th century. A time that the mainstream history likes to tell us was knocking out palaces. So they were just throwing dates around, telling us that they constructed the St. Paul Church between the end of the 12th and beginning of the 13th century, from 800 years ago. And we were all just nodding in acceptance for 200 years. with zero documentation proving this. This is all based on trust. And this group that we're supposed to be trusting has proven to be pretty shady, where they tell us that the architecture is superb, particularly the facade with its 2 towers, the choir with ambulatory, with 5 radiating chapels. Interesting. And telling us that in 1835, that the population of this location was only 1,000 people. And the population of England since 1801, the exact timeline that we're talking about here worldwide, from the beginning point of this fabricated mainstream timeline, beginning around 1776, was at around 9 million people. It has grown to over 56 million in just the last 220 years. So if we do the math on this, the population is decreasing at a rate of 83.92% in just the last 220 years. And this fact alone should get everyone thinking. This stat shows that in the year 1141, the time period that they're talking about here, according to the math, based on data that they're providing, the population of England would sit at 37,898 people. In the entire country, having only 37,000 people in the year 1141 and knocking out palaces is not mathematically probable at all. You would think that there would be a single argument that goes the mainstream history's way. You would think that if their tales were true, this type of stuff would not happen. Yet, every single time you go deeper, there is yet another flaw. The worldwide population mathematically was basically zero, based on everything that we know and have seen. In my opinion, I believe that anything before 1776 is basically fabricated, and an attempt to fit into this timeline that we are all in. And this is when we take it a step further and we go to Spain. And according to the worldometers.info, Spain's population sits at roughly 47 million people, growing around 18 million people in the last 69 years. This drop off of people is so dramatic worldwide that, in my opinion, proves that the beginning of our timeline, our batch of people, was simply not that long ago. This is according to their math, their numbers, that anyone in the world can go look at. These people of the 12 and 1300s were supposedly also without shipping companies. They were without power tools, no light bulbs, and suffering. Again, they give us these stories of the past and tell us that there were events. They tell us all of these things where the population was this and that. But at the end of the day, we are not 100% sure that these stories from the 1300s are true. So the only math we can go off of is what we are provided from when we are actually here and documenting it. And now we can do the same thing with the worldwide population, where the population is decreasing at a rate of 66.1765% every 69 years. The rate of the population worldwide should not be increasing or decreasing by 66%. This is obviously showing that there's something going on. At this rate, 1886 would have realistically only had 928 million people, and 1817 worldwide would mathematically already have been down to 314 million people. And this is information that is provided to us, sitting right here in front of our faces, where they, in my opinion, were just waiting for us to find this. At this point, I think this is a game to this group to see who can figure this out. All of this information is all here provided with clues. All we have to do is simply look. The math doesn't lie. The worldwide population would mathematically drop down to only 106 million people in 1748, which was only 31 years after we are told that this group began. In 1679, according to this math, there were only 35 million people here. Worldwide, the population in 1610 would have only been 11.8 million. 3.9 million people in 1541, and if we bring it all the way back to the year 1200, 800 years ago, the exact same year that the mainstream history is telling us all about, like they were there and saw it happening themselves. They saw those 1200s and 1300s people just smacking those stones right into place, and they're there forever. They are telling us that it was built at the end, not the beginning, but at the end of the 12th century at this rate, every 69 years, decreasing by 66% overall. Nobody is even here. Only 17,700 people worldwide, and this is all based on basic math and numbers that are provided to us. And if this is true, this completely disproves these stories, these tales that people in the 13th century were building massive cathedrals. It basically puts an end to all historical narratives suggesting that a population of basically nobody, more specifically 17,000 people worldwide, were as advanced or more advanced than we are today in terms of construction that we can still see today, yet being primitive, wearing night outfits, and fighting with swords, having zero power tools, no light bulbs, riding around on horses, and not having a single truck to ship millions of pounds of stone. No form of communication other than using their local raven to send messages to far lands, having provided zero factual evidence that they were ever even transporting stones, and zero mention of any training processes ever, leaving this part of the story out every single time, or ever explaining how these shipping routes were all figured out. Where is the evidence that we need to show that their stories are true? Where is it? That civilization of nobody with nothing had the capabilities to construct castles, cathedrals, basilicas, and the rest. No. Once you actually stop and think about it for 2 seconds, it simply doesn't add up. The 1200s, riding by feathers and sleeping in huts, suffering in winters, yet knocking out massive cathedrals, faster and in most cases much better than we do today. And they last for thousands of years, and they survive floods, hurricanes, and the rest. And their population was mathematically proven to be basically nobody. This tale that we are told is nonsense at this point. Now that we all have an understanding that the worldwide population, the math, is on our side, that this is not probable, there will be zero doubt in your mind that we have been told a massive lie. An ancient cathedral located in Athens, Greece. A photo that was taken in 1860, 164 years ago, where we have shown that the worldwide population was just over 300 million, nowhere near the 8 billion mark that we are told that we have today. A cathedral that was sitting on dirt. We're gonna zoom in on this thing and find something incredible. The detail on the front of this building is unbelievable. We know that Tartaria's flag was a griffin. We've seen this logo on buildings all over the world, which we have even seen in episode 40. When we went to Wisconsin, a civilization that I believe most likely originated in the Pacific Ocean, in a no-fly zone today, and spread out to the rest of the world from that point on. As we have shown in episodes 60 and 61, as we get closer to the front of this building in Greece, we have a logo of the previous civilization. And again, these photos were taken in the 1800s in a collection by Nicholas Katsimpoulas. And here we have the Acropolis in Athens, Greece. And I was just looking at this area on Google Earth, where there is another hill next to the Acropolis. I saw these stairs on the side of this hill. And it's weird because they won't let you drop the view down on them and get a closer look at them. It seems to me like this grass and dirt is covering a much larger structure that we can't see, with the stairs being exposed on the side. It looks like it's been melted and they've just built on top of it. It's very strange. So here at the top, that's where these stairs are. And down here at the bottom is the Acropolis. So you can see how close they are to each other. And before we even look at the mainstream narrative surrounding it, it should just show anyone in a split second that this site was clearly constructed by an advanced civilization. We have detailed columns all over the place. We have some sort of stage here, and we have a mainstream story that should be a lot of fun for us today. And now that we have unlocked the advanced civilization of Mu in episodes 60 and 61 that I think a lot of us enjoyed, we understand where these buildings and people most likely originated from, where Lemuria holds the name Mu inside of it, putting it right in our faces. The Hill of Mu-Zis, where Mu is also right in the name, meaning a type of goddess in Greek mythology. Another connection to Mu. It's very interesting. And before we go on with this mainstream narrative, I have to point this out. We all understand that these scaffolding that they have here for decades are put here to make us believe that our civilization is somehow helping the ancient structure survive, repairing it, when we all know that it doesn't need our help at all. This site was obviously destroyed on purpose. It is not crumbling and falling apart over time. The scaffolding is, in a sense, a magic trick. It's there to make 99% of people think that our civilization is giving this place an upgrade, making our civilization think that we are more advanced and that it needs our help, when it doesn't need our help at all. When we construct our buildings like this, and then you have the previous civilization's work towering over it, we are not evolving and we are not advancing. We have a side-by-side comparison right here. Now that we have a solid understanding of this area and what it looks like a little bit, let's all take this thing up a notch and have some fun. We know that the population mathematically was basically nothing in the 1200s. We've calculated it to around 17,700 people worldwide. Now, could you imagine the 600s based on the math and the data that we've been given, at a decreasing population rate of 66.17% every 69 years, where we saw that there would have only been 11.8 million people in 1610 and 17,000 people in the year 1196. Well, I did the math, and based on the numbers that they have provided us, and based on a 66.1765% population decrease rate per 69 years, in the year 600, the population worldwide would have been 3 people, meaning that either the beginning of human existence was in or around the year 644, based on math, or something massive happened and reset the population very recent. Either way, something massive is going on here that's just been uncovered, especially when the mainstream history tells us that the Acropolis of Athens, Greece, was constructed on a massive hill around the year -1300 to -1200, which we know the population worldwide would have been 0. Even if the population hasn't always decreased at 66%, the simple fact is that going back in time, the population decreases. This is proven through the data that they provided us. The population in -1300, however you want to go about it, would have been 0. If you are going off the mainstream story, their data, you can say that there were plagues. You can say that there were these stories, when we know that these stories have massive flaws at this point. Anything provided hundreds of years ago can easily be picked apart. We have done this hundreds of times at this point, based on facts, things that we can prove, things that we have here right in front of us, data. It proves to me that we aren't wrong. The population data was always a massive key for us, a key that proves that there was a previous civilization here before us, and something massive happened in this place that we all live, right around the year 1776, worldwide. This information, this data, that 3 people were here worldwide in the year 644. This math, it's been here. It's always been here. It's just been waiting for us to see it. And now that we all do, we can all go much, much deeper.